me,
Oh, I gotta accept. Got it. Okay.
Okay.
I
Are we
guess
recording now?
you're
Are you
on.
ready? Oh, I'm on?
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We're back again with the Guilford Oral History Project. I am speaking with my cousin Wanda Wilson Garcia, and also my very dear friend Wayne Davis, who has been with me through this project. And, I'm just so amazed at your interest and your efforts, and your research has been just amazing. And Wanda, thank you so much. I love you.
Oh, I love you
We're
too.
going to go ahead and start this interview now.
Okay.
But first, I'd like to read this permission form that you signed. It says that you give your permission for any audio recordings, video recordings, photography made during this project to be used by researchers and the public for educational purposes, including publications, exhibitions, World Wide Web, and presentations. By giving your permission, you do not give up any copyright or performance rights that you may hold. So you do agree, don't you?
I agree.
Okay. So now we're going to start the questions. And Wanda, anytime you want to just, go off the cuff, because I know you have so much to share, because you were right there with Uncle Roger and
Yeah.
your mom and Agnes, your grandma. You were right there. You grew up in that house. You are an eyewitness. And Wayne, anytime that you want to ask Wanda any kind of questions, just feel free to jump in. Okay. So
Thank you.
here we go. Wanda,
Yes.
what is your full name and were you named for anyone?
My full name is Wanda Yvette Wilson Garcia, but I put Carter in parentheses because I am, a Carter descendant. And no, I was not named for anyone. I think my mom went on a limb, radical 60s, I guess, and decided to name me uniquely. I know that there is a naming convention, I guess, if you will, in my on the female side of our family, where everyone is Elizabeth Teresa. So like, for example, my grandmother was Agnes Elizabeth Teresa Crawford Carter, and my mother was Sylvia Elizabeth Teresa. So I didn't get the Elizabeth Teresa
Okay.
name, but that's okay.
Elizabeth is my middle name.
Wow. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
where were you born and where did you grow up, Wanda?
I was literally born in the house I grew up in. I was literally born there. Born at home. And I grew up in Ellicott City, the old part of Ellicott City, up right above what they consider historical Ellicott City. And actually less than a quarter of a mile from the original site where the Carter's bus service building was. But yeah, grew up in Ellicott City, born and bred, literally. So.
Okay. So what is your relationship to Roger, Agnes, and Sylvia Betty Carter?
Well, Roger and Agnes, which is really weird. I usually call them Grandma and Grandpa. Would never call them by their first name. Yeah, Roger and Agnes are both my maternal grandfather and grandmother. Sylvia, or Betty, as she's known in the family and in the community, is my mother. And so, and you were asking about like what was life like with living. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. My grandfather and I shared a passion for horses. I always had a horse. I can't even remember when I didn't have a horse. I either had a pony when I was very young, through my 20s when I just, went off to college and just never, didn't come back to take good care of my horses. So, yeah, we were horse people, very business entrepreneurial. My grandfather always told me, don't work for people, quote unquote, and that you should always, have your own. And, from like, I can remember maybe from the age of 8, I always tried to start little businesses. One is very famous in my family. In the 70s, halter tops were popular. I think everybody wore halter tops. So me and my next door neighbor, we put up a little stand on the side of the road, and I had a sewing machine because my grandmother and we spent time sewing. She taught me how to quilt and sew and do all of that. So we sewed like, I don't know, maybe 100 halter tops, and for all sizes, and we were selling them on the side of the road. This is like 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
So, and my grandfather would come home and just shake his head, so I think it was called Soul Sisters Halter Tops. So in the middle of Ellicott City, which was an interesting, place to be. Let's just put it that way. So, yeah. So, I mean, I was always encouraged to be entrepreneurial. We laughed a lot. It was a very warm home, really. Yep.
Okay. So when was Roger Carter born, and who were his parents?
He was born, he and I are both Libras. So I was born October 11th. He was born October 18th, 1915.
Okay.
And his parents, he was born, I believe, at home. I think too.
In Guilford.
And his parents, my great grandparents are Samuel Archer Carter, I believe, and Nora Kelly Carter, which was her, Kelly was her maiden name. And that's about all I know.
And Uncle Roger's grandfather was actually Willis Carter, who's the founding first pastor of the First Baptist Church of Guilford.
And a stone cutter, a sought after stone cutter too.
Yes,
he was literally sought after from Virginia, I believe, to cut stone in DC. So
So what was Roger Carter's life like in Guilford growing up on the Carter farm?
Well, he used to use those stories to, let's just say, discipline me, I guess, because I guess basically I am more of a, kind of a dreamer, an artist, kind of a free spirited, always was. And so, in his life, he would share how he had to work really hard on the farm. Everybody had chores. There was always cows involved, and they had horses too, but they were work horses, so he had to tend to chores, lots and lots of chores. I understand that my great grandfather was really a kind of a hard driving man. He was very firm with the males in the family, his brothers, my grandfather and his brothers. I don't think he was so much so with Aunt Naomi and Aunt Sis and Aunt Bertina. Maybe they were more with great grandma, but he was very firm, and he was influenced by his father in terms of the hard work ethic and just, making your own luck,
they believed, that family believed in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
They were all of them. They were raised to work for themselves.
Absolutely.
Because
I used to hear it all the time.
The Carter farm, employed a lot of people in the community. They provided homes for the community. They provided meals. Hot meals. I believe their father also had a store of his own on that property.
I think so too. I do recall something, a hint of that being true. Yes.
Yeah.
I know that they had like little bungalows that they would rent on the land. They had on the farm itself. They had like rental units that were there. So I mean, again, very diversified, entrepreneurial. I mean, my grandfather, I'm telling you, he used to say, get on me about, my grades and, doing good in school. And
Mhm.
just really, being the person who controlled my destiny.
Yeah.
Don't work for anyone. That's what he's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And they were very strict about education, you
100%.
know, 150%, you know,
I got 5
education
college
was,
degrees. I mean,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I didn't. I was.
yeah,
I was kind of scared to stop. I mean, it's
yeah,
like, when do you? No, I'm
right.
joking, but
You
yeah,
know,
I mean, education was really a big piece,
it
and very
it was
valued. Yeah.
very,
So
very intense about that,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
Uncle Roger really set a good example for you. You
Yes,
know,
he
what I
did.
mean, he
Mhm.
said, I mean, because the way that he was raised by his father, and because of the way
It was
Sam
tough.
was raised by Willis,
Yep,
it was in their genes. They
absolutely.
absolutely were not going to work for anyone else. You
And
know what
just
I
think about
mean?
it. These men, great great grandpa Willis was a child of a slave. If
Yeah,
you go back far enough, I mean, so
yeah,
to go from a person who was an enslaved human being to
hmm,
founding a church, to his
yes,
grandson having a farm, to his
right,
great grandchildren being entrepreneurs. I mean, that's a heck of
right.
a story. That's amazing.
Yes, yeah,
It's
because he
amazing.
Willis came up here barely out of slavery, and you
Absolutely.
know, I mean, did a lot of first things in Guilford,
Yep.
and I really
Hmm.
don't think he gets the credit that he deserves in the community because, I'm just amazed at him having the mind of a genius. You know what I mean? To me, that's a genius mind to come up here, leave your family in Virginia, and do all that he did. But I
Absolutely.
also heard that after Uncle Roger would come home from school, he would have to come home around 6:30
Yeah.
and
Do
milk the
chores.
cows
Yep,
and
yep,
do
yep.
chores,
I
you
mean, and
know,
this is after walking. He had
to
to
school.
hitchhike a ride to school. This is what I'm saying. He used his stories to discipline me. He's like,
Yeah.
I used to hitchhike and walk the railroads and, in the snow. I mean, how parents say, I
Yes.
walked uphill in the snow both
Right.
ways to school,
Yeah.
and what's your
It's
problem? No, he
yeah.
literally, he literally
Yeah.
hitchhiked to PG County.
I
I
know.
don't know where Lakeland was.
High school. Yeah.
Yeah, Lakeland High School. I don't know where that was, but I imagine it's
Hmm.
not like on the border of
It's in
Howard
college.
County.
It's in College Park.
So we know, like, from Howard County, say Guilford to College Park, it's a good 30-minute drive in a
Right.
car. So
Hmm.
that was a
Yeah.
trek, and he did it every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah. I
both
mean, he
ways.
would get up. The high school, that takes me to the next question of the high
Mhm.
school that he attended, which
Yeah,
was
Lakeland,
Lakeland High School in
mhm.
College Park. And like you
Yeah,
said, he would have to get up at 6:30 in the morning to be at school by 9. You know
and
what I
then come home
mean?
and do
So,
chores
right.
and
Yeah, I
homework.
mean, that's
It's
that's
insane.
determined that's determination.
Absolutely,
you know. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's determination. So what year did Uncle Roger graduate? I keep saying Uncle Roger, but your
Yeah, well,
granddaddy.
he is, of course. I want to say grandpa. You called him Roger. Um,
What year did he graduate from high school, and how old was he when he graduated?
he was 19, and I had to write this down because I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think it was like 1934. Well,
He
obviously
did,
he's
yes.
19, and so it took him a while to complete
Mm,
high school. So, but he
yeah,
did, and he wanted to be a doctor. Believe it or
he
not,
did. He
he
did.
really did, and he spoke of that
Hmm.
definitely when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But of course, because of Jim Crow and segregation and the where we are in the
Hmm.
north of the South, there weren't many opportunities afforded to him,
Right.
to say
Yeah.
get to
But
Howard University or something. So
he kept going though. He kept
yes, he
going.
did. Oh my
Yeah,
God,
he kept
yes, he
going.
did.
So this question, why did Roger Carter convert to be a Catholic?
Right, grandson of a Baptist minister, right? That was a little controversial, I'm sure. It was a lot of, I mean, if I imagine my great grandfather as big, he was bigger than life and very stern and strict. So I can
Right.
imagine it was an uncomfortable conversation. to have, if he probably had it from across the street, most likely, so he could run. He converted to Catholicism because he was in love. He fell in love with my
Yes.
grandmother, and
Yes.
to go against a staunchly Baptist family and to convert to Catholicism, that was a big deal, you know.
It was a
So
big deal, but his
it was
father,
a lot.
I understand that his father said, as long as you stay in church, there's only one God and we'll all meet in heaven.
There you go.
What an explanation.
There
But
you go.
he was afraid to tell his father
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, he was.
yeah, but
But
he,
my grandmother,
he
the only way he could marry her was to, convert, and he
yeah.
did. Yeah.
Okay, now when did they get married and when did they move to Ellicott City? And what year was your mom born?
Okay, so I don't have accurate dates on the first two questions, right?
Okay.
I believe, well, okay, the house that in Ellicott City was owned by my great grandmother, my maternal great grandmother, my grandmother's mother, Rachel Crawford, who, believe it or not, it was very, very unusual for a woman to have purchased property. First of all, this was her house, and my grandmother wanted to be near her because she was not well. She had health issues. And so my grandfather agreed that they live with her so that my grandmother could care for her mother, as well as, he could, start work and do what he needed to do. I think your second question, when did they move there? I believe it was perhaps before my mother was born. I want to say maybe 38. I'm not sure, but it'd be either the
40s.
very late 30s to the very early 40s.
Yes.
My mother was born March 24th, 1939.
Okay.
So, and she's their only child. And yeah, so they ended up there and they lived their lives there. Yeah. And I was born in that house too. That's the house I was born in.
Well, I understand that when they moved to Ellicott City, they were the first and only African American family in that white neighborhood.
They were. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I
In
understand.
fact, my mother would tell stories of her growing up. She went to St. Paul's School, which is on Church Lane down where the railroad museum is. There's the little road that curls. Yeah. It either goes to New Cut Road or you bear to the left. Anyway, she went to St. Paul's School. So yes. I'm sorry. I lost the question.
That's okay.
But yeah, they were, yes. And my mom would tell stories of some neighbors that had moved, I believe, from the north somewhere, like, I don't know, Pennsylvania or something. And they were their next door neighbors, the Greens. And that was her only friends because everybody else didn't want to really, they were polite. They didn't really cause any problems, but yes. And even when I was growing up there, it was only 2 Black families. And I'm saying goodness. On the whole stretch.
What?
Until you got to, Fells Lane or Hilltop. Yeah. So.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that home, his Uncle Roger's home, where your home also, your home that you grew up in, it's still standing on Main Street.
Yeah, it's been renovated. It's been updated and all of that. But yes, it is. It's still standing. So
yeah. So when did the auto repair shop open and what year was the Carter Bus Company established?
Okay. Now, as I said, some of the year information, I really need to dig a little deeper. It's just because I've heard these stories all my life and they never really said, well, in 1938, they were just like, yeah, I started this repair shop and this is how it started. I can tell you how it started. It was my mom, from what I understand and what I remember, she was rather young, like she was about 4 years old. So like 1943. perhaps around the early 40s, this
You got
shop,
it.
the
Yeah.
repair shop started.
Yeah.
And it was actually some space he had rented. I believe the sheriff of the town owned this little garage, which I think is still there. Actually, I haven't been through there in a while, but as the last time I went there, I always kind of look. And so what he was doing was just repairing cars. He was doing auto mechanic work from this little shop. And so he eventually went to an auction and purchased this kind of a rejected army vehicle.
Yeah.
They always used to refer to it as the carry-all. And I was like, I don't know what, I guess it carries all. I don't know. But, or a lot. It carries a lot. Maybe not all, but a lot. And so that was the first vehicle for Carter's bus service. And the first driver was my grandmother. She was the first employee and co-owner, I guess you could say, of Carter's bus service. So yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That did answer my question, because the next question was going to be, what was the first vehicle for the Carter's bus service? And it was an Army reject station wagon.
Yeah, they always just used to refer to it as the carry-all.
Right.
So I've actually tried to look up a carry-all. I couldn't find anything. So maybe that, that's obviously their nickname for the vehicle. So
that's slang for that era of time.
Yes.
Yeah. So what year was the first Carter's bus purchased?
Okay, so I know that he would, they used that vehicle. He was paid very little in today's standards, for transporting Black students from various places. I think mainly, I believe, DeRegan Manor. I know even when I was a kid, we had this relationship with DeRegan Manor. But I think after a couple of years of using the carry-all to transport these children, I would say, so we're talking about 43, maybe 46, something like that. The first bus, but he would purchase vehicles, new buses, or transports every few years. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What schools in Howard County did the Carter's Bus Company provide transportation for?
Oof. Pretty much everywhere. All of them. I believe all the public schools. We had private schools that we provided transportation for. Oh my gosh, Bet Yelladine.
Head Start.
Head Start definitely, but we also did transportation. Oh my gosh, the schools, their names are failing me.
Harriet Tubman.
Yes, Harriet Tubman in terms of early on. Let me go back. I'm kind of talking about the 80s, but early on, yes. Because he graduated just before Harriet Tubman opened. Yes. Unfortunately, he didn't. That would have saved him a lot of distance if he had the opportunity. So yes, he did provide transportation for Harriet Tubman, but he was also, I believe, the first I think PTA president. He also did janitorial work after he closed his shop. He would clean Harriet Tubman, to help them out. And he was good friends with Mr. Kraft, Silas Kraft.
He sure
I
was,
met Mr. Kraft. I know, and his wife and everything. So,
they used to play on the baseball team together.
Yes. And so he was very involved, not just with providing bus transportation, but he was also involved. I know my grandmother was the president of like the Mothers Club, I think it was called. And which I guess, I guess it's a Mothers Club. I don't know what they did per se, but I know he was the president of PTA at Harriet Tubman at one time. So he was very involved, more than just providing transportation.
And sometimes I heard that Uncle Roger drove the buses himself, and people
Oh,
did not know he was the owner of the company.
all the
You
time.
know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, we all
know.
did. We all had to. Even, yeah. I had to drive a bus. Yes, we all did.
You drove a bus, Wanda?
Oh my gosh. Yes, many times.
What?
Yes. Oh
Wow.
my golly.
Yeah, I know
Yes, I drove buses.
Uncle Bobby drove the bus.
Hmm.
My father drove a bus.
I'm telling you, if
Yeah,
you're in the
so
family and you have a
you
license and
you
you
gonna
got to
drive.
get down to DMV and get a C-class license and you're on the bus. Yes, yeah, that's yes. But he did, and he did
Yeah,
even in he would fill in like if a driver was out or sick or
yeah,
whatever, or if
yeah,
we were between hires or something, he would jump on the bus. And a lot of
yeah,
I have coworkers who are kind of my age, maybe a little younger. And then when they find out that he was my grandfather, they're like, "Oh my God, Mr. Carter was so nice. He gave me lunch money, when I didn't have any food." Or, I mean, they would just bombard me with stories, and I'm not
yeah,
surprised because that's
yeah,
how we rolled in terms of how we treated people. So,
yeah.
but he was always
So
kind to me,
very,
thriving.
very kind person. Very kind person. Always giving. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, what year was the Ellicott City Colored School building sold to Uncle Roger and Aunt Agnes?
Right. I want to say in the late 70s.
Yes.
I'm not exact. As I said, there are some things one day because I had to work at the shop after school. Child labor laws, I guess, didn't apply to me at all. But I just remembered all of a sudden we had taken possession of this thing. And I think it was like in the late 70s, 77,
Yeah, it
maybe.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, your grandmother attended that school in the 1920s.
Yes, she did.
Yeah,
She sure did.
and
Did.
and and it's stated that she was born in a house that stood behind the school. I don't know if the
Yes.
house is still there or not.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Ryans, I believe, the Ryan family. It was standing, I know, maybe 30 years ago. I don't know now.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
She sure did. And she told stories of that experience, that
Hmm.
school was just a structure. They did
Yeah,
not really provide any heat,
nothing.
water. I
No.
think they had an outhouse. I remember I guess when we took possession, the outhouse was still there. Cause
Yeah,
so yeah. So
yeah. I understand they didn't have electricity, running water. They
nothing.
only had pot belly stove.
Hot belly stove.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
yes, that was kind of harsh. Um,
Yep.
what year was Roger Carter appointed as the first Black person to be a part of the Howard County Planning Board and the Ellicott City Rotary Club?
Again, a lot of things happened in the 70s for
Yes,
him. I mean,
yes,
I know that um I would say it was probably around. I just remember he had a lot of plaques. Unfortunately, we've lost some artifacts along the way, but I would say between 70, 69. Not only was he part of the Rotary Club, but the Kiwanis Club. There was like all of these, the Chamber of Commerce, Howard County Chamber of Commerce. I believe it was 78 for the Rotary Club. He
yes,
was the
you got
first
it.
Black male member of the Rotary Club. So yeah.
Yes, yes.
And my mother was
So
the first Black woman member.
yes, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm
Yep.
glad you mentioned that. Wayne, is there anything that you'd like to ask Wanda?
Um, well, I was curious about the use of the old colored school. What was that used for the, for Roger Carter's business?
Well, okay. So there was a time where my grandfather had partnered with a man called Roger Marino, and they were doing what was called R&R tours. And they had this short little 3-row school bus that they were doing historical tours throughout Howard County. And I believe that I think my grandfather had the intent to keep that site as a historical point of interest. But he got busy, as it were, and we used it pretty much for storage. So but I do recall this was probably 73, maybe. I remember I was the tour guide. I was forced to be the tour guide for R&R tour service. I had to your left is blah, 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 but I do know that was an intention, but I don't think it panned out. I think we just kind of pointed to it and kept it moving. Yeah.
Well, I do know that at one time they used that building as a church.
Yes.
It used to be a church.
Yeah, we even found like hymnals and things like that in there. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Before they sold it to Uncle Roger, it was a church, I believe.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else, Wayne, that you'd like to ask?
Yes, I understand that there still may be some Carter family memorabilia in that building.
Potentially, yes. I have not been in that building in many years. I know we sold the property to the county at some point. I believe it was in the 90s. So I'm sure there may be some things that are there. I know that I've had recent conversations with a person from Caitlin, I don't know her last name. She offered that we could go in and, claim those things. And I will at some point do that. But yeah, from what I understand, there may be some artifacts that are there.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else, Wayne?
Yeah, there are just two other things. One is you mentioned a business relationship that your grandfather had with Reagan Manor.
Yeah, not so much so a business relationship with Reagan Manor, because Reagan Manor was pretty much a plantation. But the workers who lived, there were people, their descendants, I believe, of slaves who still kind of lived on the manor. And there were also workers who I guess had children that needed to go to school. And so as part of, I guess, his agreement with them, and the parish priest actually hired him to transport these students to St. Paul's Catholic school, the colored school for St. Paul's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I understand that he was only paid $100 a month to do that.
And I don't know what that is in 2020 money, but it may have been probably an unfair amount, but an okay amount, because he still was able to, save and find a way to purchase vehicles, which grew his fleet eventually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because his company, this Carter bus service, went from one vehicle to 16 buses, I believe, or more.
More, and we had like 3 motor coaches at one time, and I think it was like 17, 18 buses. I mean, and we were actually going to expand to even more, but my grandfather wanted to keep the business small so that he could be personable and to give that personal touch to his customers. He was a unique guy.
Very unique.
Really
very unique, kind person.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else, Wayne? I think we have one more question.
Yeah, my last question, which you can, go on about if you wish. This is the EC 250 year. And since you and your family grew up in Ellicott City, I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about those experiences and things that you might have heard from, your grandfather or mother about how it was for them. And you kind of mentioned that when you got down, that you were kind of isolated as a black family, until you got, and down to Fells Lane and Hilltop, and I assume Merriman as well. I don't know if you ever walked in those areas or.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I had a cousin, a relative who was married to someone who lived on Merriman Lane. Yeah, I'm familiar. I'm from there. Yeah, I've been on all those little streets. So yes. So speaking about my grandfather, I'll start with my grandparents' experience in Ellicott City. You know, they were just a black family. I believe that where that area, you'd have to see it, and it's very difficult to describe because it's not a block, where it's defined, but it's like a length of houses. It was a very unusual place where people were very polite to each other. They respected, everybody stayed in their, so to speak, lane, but they had respect for each other. Now, if you stepped north of that, and what I mean by north of that, if you went past Rogers Avenue, going toward Clarksville, heading west, I guess, not so much. Or if you went, south, there's a business called, we called it Klein's. It was owned by the Klein's family, International, I believe it's International Harvester. I can't even remember the name of the business now, but anyway, there's like a little business section across the street from the house. If you went past that, going down to the historical area, you're gonna face, like even physical attacks. It was like that.
God.
It was crazy. That's why, I in our conversation earlier, I learned how to ride a bike very fast. I learned how to run on gravel barefoot, and I learned how to duck stones. That's all, that was my own one woman Olympic event. For my grandparents, again, they functioned within that system. Now, for my mother, she did have a very she was only child. So she did have a somewhat isolated experience where her one friend who was from the North, a white child, it was a girl and a boy. They were friends, the Greens. But again, she couldn't go, north or south of this particular area. And then when I came along, sadly, three generations of kind of being isolated or confined to a select space. But I rode my bike and went different places, but we just, when Ellicott City was a functional town, now it's a tourist attraction. But when it actually had a grocery store and a post office, I would run errands for my grandparents or my parents or whatever. But I'd have to be careful in certain spaces. Even on Main Street, it was like, it was very interesting. But yeah, overall, as the business grew, they respected him because he had money. Sadly, I gained respect, a little more respect, because I was related to him. So it was that. But yeah, Ellicott City was a very interesting place, to be honest. But fortunately, we traveled. We had other experiences that, our minds were, and our experiences were beyond that confined space. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's very interesting to
Hope
hear.
I answered your question.
You did. You painted a perfect picture.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Just a little tourist tidbit of a question. When you walked on Merriman, did you ever see that old log cabin that they showcase now? You remember that at all?
It was probably not well cared for or something.
Right.
Okay, Merriman Lane, when Ellicott City was a functional town, that area was somewhat poor. I had friends. I had a couple of, like, a friend who lived on Merriman Lane, that I visit very infrequently, but I just noticed that it was different than my experience. I would say perhaps poor. So the log cabin has probably been all, as we say, gussied up, and repaired and all of that. But I think at the time, if I'm remembering what I think I'm remembering, it was, it was probably not well cared for, maybe even abandoned.
Oh my.
So yeah. But I just know that I did spend an inordinate amount of time on Merriman Lane. So, but
Where is Merriman Lane? I'm not familiar with where. I know where the log cabin sits now, but
it's
I don't
kind of
know
down
where.
below the courthouse. It's like not far from the court. Well, there's the back way you can go to the courthouse from Frederick Road or Main Street. And it's like the street. There used to be a sawmill. It's hard to describe. There's I don't even know if La Palapa restaurant is there anymore, but it would be kind of like just across the street. It should be like within a block of that.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know how to describe it, but it's it's not.
Is it far from the what is that? The judge's bench? You know where that restaurant is now?
It's up. It's down from the judge's bench. Down meaning going toward the train museum, going in that direction.
Oh,
maybe
on the left hand. On the left?
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have to look for it because I'm not familiar with that street, but I hear it. I hear the name called a lot, but I'm not familiar with where it is. What's that?
It was a nondescript little place.
Really?
It was just the place,
Okay. And people lived on that street.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to share a funny story about Uncle Roger that I read, if you don't mind.
Please. I'm sure there's a lot. He's a funny guy.
But this one I read in the book that they have about the history of Blacks in Howard County. He said that one year he had to play Santa Claus in 4 schools in one day. Ellicott City, Atherton, Guilford, and Cooksville. And he said while driving the bus, he was dressed as Santa Claus that day. He said he was leaving the Ellicott City School running late, driving out on Route 40 when he was stopped by a state trooper for speeding. Right. And when the officer approached Uncle Roger, the officer said, "You should have reindeer instead of a bus. Where are you going, sir?" And Uncle Roger said, "Officer, I know I'm speeding, but I've got to be at Lisbon for the little Head Start children." And the officer said, "Well, I tell you what, this is one time that Santa Claus is going to get an escort." So Uncle Roger got an escort by a police officer that pulled him over to the Lisbon school, so he could play Santa Claus.
Wow.
And he would do that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. As I said, he's grandpa to me. And those stories, there's millions of these kinds of stories, stuff that,
yes.
You just, it's so many I can't remember. It's just, that is him, 100%.
And also, he said that one time he was playing Santa Claus and he forgot, the stuff that covers his face to be Santa Claus. So he put on sunglasses.
Right. That's
like,
him.
what?
Oh my God.
Man. But I'd like to read something Mr. Kraft stated at the dedication service of the first Roger Carter Neighborhood Center, saying that Uncle Roger, he never caught Uncle Roger low. Uncle Roger never griped. He never felt angry or resentful. Uncle Roger always had something to do. And, my experience with Uncle Roger was just, whenever I was around, he was just love. He loved people. He loved children. He loved giving. I never saw him angry either. Every time I saw him, he was happy, and he loved family. He loved his family. He was proud.
I can only count on maybe once or twice where he actually got angry with me. I mean, in growing up, and I was just, I was a precocious little kid, and he would talk to me, and most of the time he was always laughing about stuff. He's like, "What did you do now?"
Right.
What
Yeah.
happened now? What? Come on, get in the car. Let's go for a ride. He always take me, get me out of harm because I'd either make my grandmother mad or my mom be like, "Come on, let's go
Yeah.
get some ice cream or whatever."
Yeah.
He was my
Yeah.
escape plan. So, but he
Oh my God.
he was really cool. I mean, it's not like for this purpose, but it was true. And as I said, we were horse people, so we really bonded around our horses a lot.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
afternoon after school, I had to go like chores, like him. I had to go feed
Yeah.
the horses and groom them and all of that, and ride, exercise them and all that. And he would be
Yeah.
with them most of the time. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're so
yeah,
fortunate to have had such a great example in your life, and look at the
like,
legacy that he's left behind,
absolutely. Oh my
you
gosh,
know.
I try
Yeah.
to, you know, he never I've never heard him putting anyone down. I mean, we lived, as I said, we grew up in kind of a Jim Crow era. There was just a lot. And plus, in the 60s, there was just a lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And even after, probably more so, in the aftermath of a lot of that controversy. But I'm telling you, in my family, we never had really a bad word about others. Yeah, I mean, it was always just, I don't know, giving and
Yeah.
service,
Yeah.
and just doing the best you can, be the best human you can.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my words, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
I
It's a great man, great
yeah.
person. You're so fortunate, blessed to have been,
Oh my gosh,
raised
beyond
by
blessed.
him. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
if you could sum him up being that you are eyewitness to him 24/7, you could sum him up in a few words, what would you say about Roger Carter?
Well, I was always known to him as Wanda Pop. I was just Wanda Pop or Pop, and what can I say? It's love.
Yes.
It's personal responsibility, duty,
Mhm.
kind of being aware that what you do affects other people, be a good citizen, and personally for me, I mean, he was my buddy, he was my best friend. I don't want to start crying
I know.
today.
I
Oh my
know.
God. He
Yeah.
was cool. I mean, he taught me how to box.
He
Because
did?
I guess he wanted a boy. He bought me boxing gloves and a
Oh
heavy
no.
bag. And I mean, I was like 10 years old and I'm boxing. So he's like, yeah. I mean, it was all kinds of kooky stuff. I mean, if I said I wanted to build a fort, he'd bring me tools and wood and say, okay, do
Oh
it, get to it.
wow.
If
Wow.
he made me honor my words. So if I said something off the cuff, yeah, I'm going to build a fort today. He's like, okay, here you go. Wood, hammer, nails. Here you go. Let me see what you got.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow. That's
that's,
amazing.
I mean, yeah, I don't know why I'm crying. But
Oh,
yeah, he was a decent man.
yes.
And I think this is the ethic that he has passed on to my family, is that, and this is something I've passed on to my own daughter, even when, children are watching you. Children are watching you. And that not just the children in your home, but live your life so that children who see you, will understand, what a decent, responsible adult looks like. Children are watching you. That's kind of was said in my house a lot, and live that way, that, you can have dignity, and,
Right.
children
Yeah,
are watching,
exactly.
be careful
Wayne,
what you do.
exactly. I agree with that. I
Yep.
agree with that, because we set examples by what we say and do.
Yes,
And our children will be left behind when we go to heaven, and they have to live up to the legacy that's been left for them.
absolutely. And we don't live
Be-
in silos. We are
no,
part of, we're all connected. We're all human beings on this
Yeah.
planet, and we
Yeah.
all see each other. And so
Right.
we have to live that way,
Yeah.
be the part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy. I'm just excited that you
You-
you agreed to do this. I mean, we put a dent in, the history about Uncle Roger and Aunt Agnes and your mom. And, I'm so proud. I'm so proud and grateful.
I'm grateful
to,
for this opportunity. I feel bad that I
Yeah.
couldn't speak more about my grandmother, because she was a dynamo. I could talk just as long about her and what
Yeah.
she contributed to
Yeah.
him, because it
Yeah.
takes a good woman to make a good man.
Well, I mean, if you have something to say, just go ahead and say it. I mean, this is your time. You're the star of the show.
Oh my God. Okay, because I feel like I talk a lot. Well, my grandmother. Wow. First bus driver. She worked at a dentist office as a receptionist. I think his name was Dr. Brown, right there on near Merriman Street. Actually, there was
Wow.
yeah. And she broke down some barriers because customers would complain, why do you have this Negro woman in the front of your office? And he's like, because she's excellent. He stood up for her at a time that was very unusual. And this was around the time he had his shop. And my mom was still very young. So my grandmother's mother would watch my mom while she worked part-time. And so she was working to help supplement while he's building his mechanic business, right? So eventually she could afford to leave, and then she started driving for him, driving the carry-all. And she transported kids for Head Start as well in her own station wagon. I remember riding with her because I was too young when Head Start started. I was 1 year too young to go to Head Start or experience it. But I remember riding in the car with her as she picked up students for Head Start. The one thing that was really special about my grandmother was that she made lunch for all the employees. She made breakfast and lunch every day for all the employees. I remember her up in the morning first, and this is how I learned how to cook, because I was, always in the kitchen anyway, probably more than I should have been. She'd get up very early and she, cook my grandfather breakfast, but she'd every day make like egg sandwiches and different breakfast foods and put them in a bag and took them to the shop. And so every morning, if somebody didn't have breakfast, there was food. And she did the same for lunch,
Wow.
Yep.
That's amazing.
There was a man who lived behind our shop. He, I think, was traumatized either he may have schizophrenia or he has some form of mental illness. And so he lived by himself after his mom passed away, who was his caretaker. And so my grandma would make sure he had food to eat and to make sure that in the winter he had enough blankets and things like that. She always made me run up, "Can you take this to Mr. Timothy?" I'm like, as a kid, we didn't, I was like, okay, I will, and that was the longest walk, but he was nice, of course. But, as a child, you don't understand that this person acting unusual had mental health issues. But I mean, in my child's mind, I'm like, no, I don't want to, I'll just put the blankets on the steps and run. But, I mean, she was, I got it from both sides. I mean, she was awesome. She helped run the shop. She took care of me when my mom worked, when my mom and dad divorced, and, she took care of me and, with my buddy, took me everywhere. And, if I didn't have her, I'd have him,
Yeah.
So they were both, she was amazing. But, she only had an 8th grade education, but she did all the billing and all of that. I mean, self-taught.
Wow.
and she taught herself stuff at Dr. Brown's office,
Yeah.
and she would listen on the radio so that she could communicate kind of clearly, or so she wouldn't sound black, so to speak. And so she would practice listening to the radio, and that's how she got hired to answer the phone, because she had kind of that neutral accent or whatever. And so I can go on and on, but
well, when you mentioned about her cooking,
yes.
I think that was during that era, because I think that was the normal thing for women to do for employees, because even with Mary, who was Willis Carter's wife, she would do the same thing for the employees. She would make sure that they ate. She would cook every single day
every day
for the employees.
Cook.
So I think that was a normal thing to do. Wow, that's a very interesting story. Thank you for sharing that.
The only time she didn't cook is when she was in the hospital. She had an aneurysm that she had, they repaired. Thank God they fixed it. And that's the only time she didn't cook, is when she was cooking before she went to the hospital. That's she cooked like the day before her surgery. I mean, I feel lazy when I think about all of the things I really do. I'm like, wow, I have to step up my game. I really need to, after this interview, I think I'm going to go sign up for a class or something. I feel like I'm slacking, I need to cook for people or something. I don't know. I need to do something. Go wash my car. I don't know.
Wayne, would you like to ask any more questions?
No, I just want to express my gratitude for you sharing all of this. It's fascinating, and it's an important history. Good lesson.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am grateful.
Well, thank you.
Take away that children are watching. I think that's
I like that.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, I like that too. It is.
I try to live my life that way. I taught my daughter that, just children are watching,
They really are.
I'm going to put a stop to the recording now, okay?
Okay.